What's up, duelists? If you're joining from the Tyler stream, thank you guys for tuning in. This is my first time trying out that premiere video after a stream thing, so we're going to see how it does. This is a really cool deck list that I've been messing around with a lot lately. I know that Times2 has done a lot of work with Lightsworn Machinas, and I decided to push that sort of concept to the absolute limit. Of course, in those lists, it's more like Hamster Ryko, kind of like value engine stuff. This list is definitely an OTK-centered list. You're trying to summon JD, blow up the field, or summon Cyber Eltonin and blow up the field, and then spam Machina monsters and destroy your opponent, or activate multiple Pot of Avarice and just overwhelm your opponent with card advantage. For starters, we have triple Lila and triple Machina Gear Frame, as well as Charge of the Light Brigade, so you got 7 starters, which is actually a pretty decent number for like this type of format. You got triple Solar Recharge to pitch your dudes and draw into your Gear Frames or your Lilas. And then, of course, you've got Gores and Trag to stay alive. Cyber Dragons are in the main deck here. They are additional pitches for Machina Fortress. If you draw them, they can help bait Bottomless for your Lila. They can help like force Royal Oppressions, that kind of thing. And then they do turn on Cyber Eltonin if they are milled, which is pretty important. You got to play limiter removal in this deck because a lot of the times when you're going for your kill, you just need like Gear Frame plus limiter to kill, which is pretty insane. If you think about it, like let's say you mill a Fortress, right? You go Gear Frame, you search Force, you pitch Force for Fortress. That's 4,300. With limiter, it's 8,600. Easy kills. Gold Sarcophagus is pretty important in this deck too. It can search for Avarice, JD, or, Gear Frame, limiter, brain, whatever you really need to get going. In the sideboard, this is where things get kind of cool. You can actually completely transition out of all of your machines in the sideboard games because people are going to be bringing in Cyber Dragons against you. So what I like to do actually is I will side out 2 Machina Fortress, leave 1 in, side out all 3 Gear Frame, side out both Machina Force, and side out the limiter removal. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cards, and you can bring in the Rhoda, the 3 DD Warrior Ladies, the Space Typhoon for Light Mirror, some combination of Royal Decree and Book of Moon, depending on the matchup, or Trap Dushu, or Consecrated, or whatever. But you can completely side out of the machine stuff. All of a sudden, your deck becomes super resilient to your opponent's sideboard strategy, which is like summon a Cyber Dragon, and you can counter their Cyber Dragon with your own, as well as with your Cyber Eltonins. The reason we leave in 1 Machina Fortress is that in the late game, you will leave it in the graveyard, and you can have the option to pitch a Cyber Eltonin as a Monster Reborn for a Machina Fortress, which can come up in like some OTK setups. So when you're sideboarding, you definitely want to leave in 1 Machina Fortress if you're siding out all the machine stuff. Alternatively, you could even side out a large percentage of the Lightsworn stuff if you're afraid of Light Mirror. However, it does get a little bit awkward because you have a much bigger Lightsworn engine. That being said, though, if you don't expect Cyber Dragon to give you too much of a problem in the post board, you can go ahead and side out like a large number of the Lightsworn package as well. This is a cool deck. It's got 2 different engines that complement each other a fair bit. There are some questionable draws where you end up with like multiple JD, multiple Force, maybe an Avarice, and then you just kind of have a slower hand. The 1 Wolf obviously can brick, but there's not as many bricks as you would think in a deck like this, and all it really takes is 1 Gear Frame or 1 Lila for this deck to get going. So let's go ahead and hop into the replay. If you guys like this type of thing, if you guys like me creating new decks like this all the fucking time, go ahead and click like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Let me know if there's a cool deck combination that I've never featured that you would like to see featured or something like this. This is today's replay. This is against Papaya. I lose the rock, paper, scissors, but that's okay. We've got Cyber Dragons. Our deck is like okay at going second. As you can see, we've drawn one of those Cyber Dragons. This is actually a fantastic opening hand. Opponent starts off. They draw, they go. We have Lila, we have Charge, we have Recharge. So I'm going to go ahead and charge for Gareth, get that little guy in the graveyard. He's the least useful, and if we do draw into Lumina, we can bring him out and start our draw engine going. We don't draw into Gareth, which is a little bit unfortunate. Or not Gareth, sorry. We don't draw into Lumina, which is a little bit unfortunate, but our grave is now live for Avarice. So if we find an Avarice, it's completely live, which is awesome too. We can summon Fortress on a future turn. The opponent drew and then passed, which means, okay, they have Gores or Trag. I'm just going to summon Lila, mill 3, and then pass. Hopefully we hit our Wolf, and we actually do, which is really nice. So 17 cards through the deck on turn 1, which is a very nice start. We do get some monsters in the graveyard. We have 1 Lightsworn name. Not the best, but there's 2 more in play. Potentially a 4th coming from the Celestia in hand. And if the opponent doesn't out these 2 cards, next turn we can just attack with both of them and then Celestia the Gores main 2. Or get a little bit more aggressive with Machina Fortress as well. Here comes Big Piece Golem, which tells me that this is a fusion deck. This is the Evil Hero fusion deck that plays Elemental Hero Prisma. This deck has topped a couple tournaments. It's kind of a fringe playable deck. I think it's like decent. I just think that it's a little bit less consistent than the more like extreme OTK variants. We pick up Aaron, which is not super great, but it could have some application later if he like needs to set a monster to survive. I go ahead and summon Lila, and my reasoning here is like summoning Lila, breaking his back row, summoning Fortress, and running over Big Piece Golem puts him in the same position that he was in last turn, where he needs to answer both Lightsworns in order to play the game, basically. I go ahead and attack with the, or don't attack with Lila, sorry. I attack his back row, essentially. I break his back row, which is a set Heavy Storm. And here I get kind of mixed up a little bit. I'm like, oh, he set Heavy Storm. Maybe he didn't have Gores, or maybe he's just baiting like a Heavy Storm or something with it. I'm not really sure. I'm still going to summon the Fortress, and I'm going to attack over Big Piece Golem. And now I actually make another play that I think is one that you have to think about a lot. And you kind of have to know this matchup a little bit. And you have to know the cards that they play. So when you see Big Piece Golem, you have to know that Dark Calling is a card that they could have. And if they have Dark Calling, they can actually banish the Gores from their hand. So Dark Calling doesn't use monsters from the field like Miracle Fusion. It uses monsters from the hand or grave. So I don't really want him to actually hold that Gores in his hand. I actually want it to be in play because that's where it's least threatening. Yeah, he can use the Gores and the token to run over my 2 Lightsworns, but then he's kind of stonewalled by the Machina Fortress, and we can eventually just like find a Raikou or an Avarice or a JD and then take over the game that way. So I think positionally it is better to actually trigger my opponent's Gores here. He does drop the Gores, obviously. The set Heavy Storm I think was a bit of an error, but like obviously we're going to have to pop the Heavy Storm before we go for anything too crazy. And here we just end phase mill. I don't need to set the limiter because there's no shot he's attacking the Fortress, because there's no reason for him to throw away his Gores here. It kind of commands the field. So he switches both his monsters to attack position. He kills both our Lightsworn names. This also plays around Celestia, which I think is smart. I hit him with anything before damage. You do have to represent Honest at all times with this deck, and at all times with Lightsworn decks in general. If your opponent attacks your monster and they have cards in hand, or they have back row, or if they have something worth playing, you have to say anything before damage. Maybe you can get lucky. Maybe you can bait a book. Maybe your opponent feels the need to play around something like that, and they can spend a card that they normally wouldn't need to spend. So it's definitely worth representing Honest even when you don't have it. So we don't have it here. Obviously, the Wolf's going to die. He's going to set a monster and pass. Our Aaron is finally going to get some use. We find Goldsark, which is perfect. So we're going to Goldsark for Avarice here because once we get to the later game, our graveyard is just going to be stacked with hella threats. Like already we have 5 threats in our grave. We have Trigodia, Machina Force, Gearframe, JD, and Cyber Eltonin, or some combination of those 5 with Honest could potentially be another way to represent a threat. So we already have 5 threats that we want to shuffle back with Avarice. And I think it's just a better thing to search for. We could search for JD, but 1 back row is stopping our JD, which is kind of awkward. Or 1 absolute 0, which this deck can very easily make, is stopping our JD. So I want the actual card advantage here, and that's why I'm searching for Pot of Avarice. I summon Aaron. I attack over the token for 400. I attack the set monster, shuffle it back into the deck. And then here I do actually set the limiter removal. The reason being is if he does go for something crazy, like some sort of like brain control, I don't know. I don't know. If he brain controls, he's taking Machina Fortress anyway, but here we are. Pass the turn. He attacks the Aaron. Again, you have to say anything before damage. I don't have Honest, obviously, but here we are. We just draw. It's another Cyber Dragon. This is probably one of the worst draws in our deck, but it's still decent here because if we draw Fortress, that's a Fortress summon, so it's not too bad. And we still do have 2 Fortresses in the deck. So it turns on Fortress as a top deck. We just pass the turn back. Here he summons Monk, which is a cool addition to this deck. I hadn't thought of using Monk before. Monk is another way to find Stratos, which kind of turns on all of your engines, and it also can find Prisma, which turns on all of your fusion spells. He goes ahead and allures for, or not allures, Summoner Monk pitches allures for Stratos. Stratos is going to search for a Malicious Edge, which is a fiend he could have in hand for Dark Calling, maybe on the next turn. Here he's going to attack the Fortress. This is going to trade with the Gores. I'm okay with putting the Gores in the grave now because next turn we have a very high potential for an OTK between Limiter Removal, Cyber Dragon, and then our 3 draws, 2 from Avarice and 1 for turn. So we have a very high potential to OTK the opponent here. I'm just going to clear his biggest monster, which can suck up the most damage. Of course, Gores is going to get popped. We find Machina Fortress, so the Cyber Dragon draw is actually not too bad. We could pitch it to Fortress, worst case scenario, if that's something we want to do. Let's go ahead and look at his hand because the game ends this turn. He does have that Dark Calling, so he was setting up for a big turn next turn. So him having that Gores in play was actually a detriment to him this whole game. Us making that play to attack with the Wolf and him deciding to drop the Gores did put him in an awkward spot where he couldn't Dark Calling for like a big damage play earlier on. Here we Pot of Avarice, go ahead and shuffle back all of our threats. Now, most of our shit is lethal here. Eltonin is a kill because we drop Eltonin, banish Cyber Dragon, pops both his monsters, and then we pitch Cyber Dragon special Machina Fortress. As long as he doesn't have Battle Fader or Trag, limited removal is game. JD, of course, is game. I think there are certain combinations with Gear Frame that are also game. I think Gear Frame is just lethal. So yeah, there's a lot of lethal combinations here, a lot of lethal cards we could have drawn in our 3 draw steps, and we are able to put it together. JD, blow up the field, and then pitch Cyber Dragon, special summon Machina Fortress, and attack for game. So that was game 1. It was kind of an interesting game where you sometimes need to understand like where a card is at its best. Is this card better in my hand or in play? We had opportunities to summon Celestia, but had we summoned Celestia, our board would have been a little bit less resilient. We would be representing less. We would be forcing less. When you have 2 Lightsworn monsters in play, you're actually much more forcing than if you go for a +1 Celestia. +1 Celestia there, and we attack into Gores. All of a sudden, our board is actually pretty fragile, and we're probably falling apart that game. Who knows? It's a little bit different. It's a little bit different of a game for sure. This game, because I saw he set Heavy Storm and he didn't have a lot of traps, what I ended up boarding in was I went with the sideboard plan that I talked about. I sided out all of the machines. And the reason being is because he has access to Elemental Hero Stratos and Elemental Hero Prisma. So he has a million copies of Cyber Dragon. He can go Prisma, reveal one of the Cyber Dragon fusions, send Cyber Dragon, and then he can contact fuse away with my machine. So they're much more of a liability post board. There's a chance he even has Cyber Dragon in the main deck. I'm not even sure, but they're much more of a liability post board, so I have to just side them all out. We go ahead and we side out 2 Machina Force, 3 Machina Gear Frame, double Fortress, limited removal. We bring in Space Typhoon, triple DD Warrior Lady, and Reinforcement of the Army. DD Warrior Lady is pretty good against Elemental Hero Gaia, not Elemental Hero, sorry, Evil Hero Gaia, because even though it's flip face up, it'll still banish the Gaia, and even though you'll take some damage, you can still represent Honest, which is decent. And then I did side in triple Book of Moon, but I didn't side in Royal Decree because I just didn't see any back row, and I just thought that he's probably playing a very back row light version of the deck. For him to set Heavy Storm like that, it just, in a game that went a couple of turns, he saw no trap cards. There's a good chance he just doesn't have that many trap cards in his deck. This game he plays Drago again, and I'm like, okay, I've seen this before. I can play Drago too. Now I don't have to summon anything. My Cyber Dragon is still an active live card. I can still summon my Lila later. I can DD Warrior Lady something later. And now he has to be the first one to commit to the board, and we will be able to get card advantage out of our Cyber Dragon. The way I'm seeing this game is it's going to be kind of a grind, and then we're going to be able to push in for the last few points of damage, as long as we can kind of secure the position a little bit. I don't want to play my monster, because then it can cut off my Cyber Dragon, and then he has something like a Jujitsu Master, and all of a sudden I'm locked into kind of an awkward draw. That's a card that this deck can side against us, especially if they're on like more back row light versions. And since he went Drago the first turn, he's going to have to commit a card this turn that he's going to lose to one of our cards. So we're going to be able to at least pick out a card from his hand. Either that, or he plays Drago again, and then he has to discard a card, and we're at +1. We have the initiative. Here he sets a back row. I go for Lila, pop the back row. We don't activate charge because there's nothing in our deck that we want to charge for yet, so we hold it. This is a tutor. It represents a lot of different things. It can be an Aaron if we need it. It can be a Raikou if we need it. It can be a Wolf if we need it for whatever reason. What else is in our deck list that we can get with it right now? It can be another Lila if we need it. So it can be like 3 different things. Jane, even if we need it. So it can be like 3-4 different things. You want to hold it till the right time to go for it, more or less. Plus, our deck is pretty threat dense right now. I kind of want to draw a threat before I start blowing all of these like mill cards, more or less. Opponent goes for Convert Contact. This is the second one. It looks like they did pick up a Neospatial monster, so they're able to play this card. They're going to pitch the Dark Panther and send Aqua Dolphin. Now, because they pitched the Dark Panther, they're not able to go for any sort of combination of Dark Calling with a Grand Mole in the graveyard. So I feel pretty safe here. He goes ahead and brain controls the Lila, sacks for Vanity's Fiend, and attacks for 2,400. Now, we do have multiple outs to this Vanity's Fiend. Again, in the sideboard games, We do have 4 copies of DD Warrior Lady, 3 copies of Book of Moon, so that's 7 outs to Vanity's Fiend. And then we also, of course, have Raikos and Charges and Honest as usual. So our hand is pretty good here against this Vanity's Fiend. We do pick up Honest, which is a really nice out to Vanity's Fiend because it'll allow us to stick Lumina Gareth, which is really nice. So I go Lumina, attack Vanity's, pitch Honest, and then main phase 2, I pitch the Gareth. Yes, this is going to mill a bunch of cards, but hopefully we can get a draw off Gareth. Unfortunately, the Lightsworn names are milled by Lumina and not Gareth, and yeah, that's it. Oh, I guess I brought in Trap Dust Shoot too. I must have sided out one other card. I don't remember what it was. I might have not sided in the Space Typhoon. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure. I definitely left in 1 Fortress. I sided out Limiter and these 5 and 2 Fortress. So that's 8 cards out. I might have also only brought in 2 Book of Moon. I'm not really sure, but I definitely did the sideboard plan. I think I sided out maybe. I'm not sure what I sided out. Anyway, I guess, yeah, Dust Shoot is good because if they go Dark Calling and they need to banish from hand, like in a situation like this, you can chain Dust Shoot and then you can take. And also, if their only defense is like Gore's Trag, then we can use Dust Shoot to force through OTKs too. He just draws and passes, which means he has Gores, but we can play through Gores pretty effectively with this hand. Special Summon the Wolf. Lumina attacks. What is he going to do? Gareth attacks. Now, we could pass here. We could pass. We could. But we could also attack with DD Warrior Lady, dropping him to 1850, which puts him in a really awkward spot. It means he can't really attack Gore or Gareth ever, or Wolf. So I'm kind of down to send it, even though he didn't drop Gores on either of these 2 attacks, and we can just pass and then represent this again next turn. The same things are going to out this board with or without the Gores in play. So I'm just going to attack for 1500, and then I'm going to attack for 2100 if he doesn't have Gores. He does have Gores. Obviously, I mean, there's no way he's playing this sort of way without Gores in his hand. But we can clear the token. Gores, on its own, is maybe killing one of our monsters and then trading with the DD Warrior Lady, and he's still dying. So he needs to do more to out our board anyway, which he would have had to do regardless. So I felt pretty comfortable attacking with the DD Warrior Lady there. End phase, we mill 5, and then we do actually get to draw a card, which is very nice. We pick up an extra copy of Cyber Dragon. While this may seem like a brick, if we do find our Machina Fortress, it's pretty good. Even if we mill it, we can now pitch double Cyber Dragon to special summon back the Machina Fortress. So it's actually not a bad draw here. At least I don't think it is. Anyway, here comes a Tribute Summon, Evil Hero Malicious Edge, and then a Miracle Fusion to stay alive. Again, he can't really afford to attack into any of our monsters because of the threat of Honest into any normal summon kills him. So he just has to do this to positionally stave himself off from dying, and he is at 1850. He needs to have that extra turn to basically put together his OTK. Wolf is going to attack over the Absolute Zero, and our draw is Gores, which is a very good draw because that means that we can just pass, and even if he goes for an Evil Hero Gaia, first off, he'll need a rock. Hold up. Fucking DB is lagging, or this shit is not working. I can't click on anything. Okay, there it is. He'll need a rock in hand, and he'll need a Dark Calling, which is 2 cards. And then on top of that, like, he won't be able to make one that can kill us from 5600, I don't think. Even if he has, like, a random, like, Gaia plate in his deck, it's only 5500 with the Gores. So we can survive thanks to Gores, which is really all we'll need. We still will need to top deck, but we have a lot of great top decks. Maybe not, because we'll be... Let's say he does have Gaia plate, right? Which he doesn't have because this deck doesn't play it. But if he does, and he puts us below 1000 and we drop Gores, we'd need to maybe find Avarice or Honest to be able to play. We also still have maybe 1 Book of Moon. I'm not really sure. Oh, no, all 3 books are gone. What did I side out for Dust Shoot? I'm really curious about that. I might have not brought in the 3rd Warrior Lady out of fear of Light Mirror. I'm not sure, though. That's something I don't really remember. Anyway, he draws, he sets a card, and he passes. We Gold Sark for Pot of Avarice. We're in the same exact situation. We're in the same exact position, which is exactly where we were last turn. If he goes for the thing, we can just drop the Gores, and then we're fine. We don't need to charge. Charging here is actually a throw. A lot of people will probably think, like, why didn't you charge for Raiko and set Raiko? Because if I charge for Raiko and set Raiko, and then he does go for the evil guy, he attacks me, he deals all that damage, and I won't get an opportunity to drop Gores. So the way Evil Hero Dark Gaia works is when he attacks a set monster, he flips it face up, and the flip effects don't activate. So I'm pretty fucked, actually, if I charge for Raiko and set it. So I can't actually afford to do that. We have to get value out of our Gores while it's still alive. Just pass the turn. He sets a couple more back row, passes the turn. We find Trag. we can just pass again. Trag is nice too because it's another layer of defense. If they attack into Gores, we drop that first because Gores is much less likely to be live than Trag. Trag can happen on any battle damage. Gores can only happen on a direct attack. The next direct attack after the following one will probably be lethal, so Gores won't be live longer. So the game plan is to drop Gores, then Trag. He just draws and passes again. Here we find Avarice, and I'm like, all right, I can just play my whole hand, and it plays through any 3 back row. Or at least it should. We Heavy Storm first. He changed Starlight Road, and I'm like, okay, that's an issue, but like, as long as we find Honest, Cyber Dragon is a lethal threat, and he has to respect that. We go ahead and charge, mill 3, go find Raikou. We want to charge and recharge first to make sure our deck is as thin as possible before we Avarice. So I charge for Raikou, I recharge away the Raikou, draw 2, mill 2. Again, saving that charge for as long as possible was good too. I don't know why, but it just was. Raikou was actually the last target in the deck. We find Honest, so now both of our Cyber Dragons are lethal threats. DD Warrior Lady, worst case, can out the Stardust Dragon if we absolutely have to. If Pot of Avarice doesn't find us a threat, we have 4 cards left in deck, so we have enough to Pot of Avarice and still draw. If you have 1 card left in deck, you actually can't activate Pot of Avarice because it would kill you. Well, it wouldn't kill you because you shuffle the card, but the card thinks it would kill you, so it's not a legal activation, basically. Pot of Avarice activates, we shuffle back, I think, everything that would be lethal, which is just Eltonin, JD, Honest, and whatever the fuck, Jane or something. I don't know why I shuffled back Jane. I probably should have shuffled back Gareth, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, because Gareth is lethal on his own, whereas Jane is just only lethal if we attack over the Stardust Dragon. Here we special Cyber Dragon. He has to respect Honest, so he bottomlesses the Cyber Dragon. I special the second Cyber Dragon. It's important to sequence things this way, because I'm going to special summon JD, I'm going to blow up the field, but I need my Cyber Dragon to be in play before he Stardust Dragon negates. Because if I summon JD and like try to blow up the field and he has like, I don't fucking know. I actually don't know. It could have been done either way. Oh yeah, if he negates with Stardust Dragon, then I can't special summon Cyber Dragon afterwards, and then I don't have a lethal threat. That's exactly why we need to special summon Cyber Dragon before JD blow up the field. It's not a very intuitive setup, but you have to go for it this way, because if you miss sequence, then you can't special summon Cyber Dragon, you can't win the game this turn, and potentially you're losing the game next turn because all of a sudden you don't have a lot of threats. So yeah, we special JD. JD activates. He has to negate with Stardust. We go ahead and Avarice again. Very broken in this deck, as you can see. It is worth considering playing 3, but I think 2 is plenty with the double Gold Sarks. You don't want to brick on it early. It is kind of the best card in the late game, though, for sure. And then we found our Lila after shuffling 3 back. Lila can break the back row, and then we can attack directly with Cyber Dragon for game. Really fun match, actually. I think this match definitely showcased all of the concepts that I wanted to put into play with our deck. And it also showcased a lot of different positional play, which makes me happy. Edison format is such a good format because your position matters oftentimes a lot more than like even the cards in your hand do, which is super cool. It's such a fun format, and it's definitely testing. I definitely could have played a lot of these turns very differently, and some of them would have lost me the game. Some of them potentially would have attributed me to a better position or something, but I think I did a pretty good job navigating what was in front of our face. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you caught the Tyler stream, thank you for sticking around for the premiere afterwards. This is probably something I'm going to try again more in the future. I've heard that it's good to do this, so we're going to try it out. Live stream into video premiere, true combo. Who knows? If you guys liked it, let me know in the comments below. See you guys in the next vid. Peace.